in what seemed to be an inevitability, Jay Shah has now become the new ICC chairman. Now, this means that he'll take charge on December 1, and there was, of course, no election as he was the only nominee. And this also means that he has to step down from his post as BCCI General Secretary. So, I asked, looking forward, what do you expect from the 35-year-old's tenure as ICC top boss, and how do you sum up his time as BCCI Secretary? What do you think are going to be his challenges now?
So first things first, one, it's a spectacular, it's a meteoric rise for Jay Shah, isn't it? I mean, when he became secretary of the BCCI, there were lots of sniggers, lots of skepticism, lots of criticism. But hey, he's here, and now he's the ICC chairman designate. So it's a very meteoric rise, and he's only 35. So that, one has to kind of put that in perspective. There have been presidents and chairmen of the ICC from India in the past, but nobody's had this kind of a rise. So that is something that he will have to, it'll obviously also, it's something that will accompany him wherever he goes, because he's, in that sense, compared to some of the earlier administrators who were there from India or from elsewhere, he doesn't have that rich an experience in the sport. It's not that he's been an administrator for 20, 25 years, and therefore this is the culmination of his career. In fact, this has come very early in his career. So that is something that, I think there will be a lot of scrutiny about everything that he does, as has been so far, isn't it? I think the biggest challenge he faces. So one thing is that India, a representative from India becoming the chairman of the ICC, obviously makes India's position even stronger in the sport. So is the largest cricket nation, is the financially the strongest. It's also the the largest number of fans. So all of that is there. But I think there will be demands that Jay Shah will have to face. I mean, I personally think how to take or steer Test cricket ahead is going to be a big challenge for somebody who's the ICC chairman. I don't think in the past, even the recent past, enough has been done apart from the World Test Championship, which was incorporated a few years back. But otherwise, because while everybody pays lip service that we must somehow protect Test cricket and uphold the dignity and the status and the stature of Test cricket, at the ground level, really, not much has been done. For instance, how many countries are playing Test cricket even now after so many years, after a century and more? So this is going to be a challenge. There is a Test cricket fund which has already been announced. So that's a step which I think is in the right direction. But how that fund operates, what it allocates to whom, is going to be of the crux.
Yeah, I was going to come to that. So there's already been speculation that because he becomes the top boss of the ICC, that India's influence over world cricket will only increase, and there have been a lot of detractors of that. But this test fund that was recently set up, it was the brainchild of an Aussie administrator, but it basically means that you are setting up a fund for the teams outside the top three, which is India, England, and Australia, to make it more viable for them to play Test cricket, because this is a very delicate time for world cricket, because the boards are trying to somehow maybe failing to balance all three formats, and this Test fund seems to be a step in the right direction, as you said. So, what do you think this would mean? A kind of culling of the bilateral ODIs or T20s, because that was one of the points that had come up, I think, from the Players Association, because they don't have any context. So, do you think the ICC could go that way?
Well, that remains to be seen, but that certainly has been the demand from several people, including somebody like, from India. Ravi Shastri has mentioned and spoken about this in the past. Yes. And he said, the bilateral series, whether it's tests or even ODIs, are losing currency. So why not just have the World Championships, the World Cups, and so on. So I think really, for me, the issue is that you've got the top 4 or 5 nations who play each other fairly regularly in test matches. The bottom 3 or 4, including now more and more the West Indies, are struggling to get the exposure and the experience, and therefore also the financial reward which can come. But if you don't have, engagements, if you don't have international matches against the big teams, the big guys, twofold. There's a problem twofold if you don't have that. One is that your source of money or revenue kind of is depleted. The other is, how do you promote the game in your own country? Or so for instance, West Indies, we've seen almost a bankruptcy where Test cricket is concerned in the last 15, 20 years. They've just slumped so badly because the focus has shifted mainly to white ball cricket, and even within that, mainly to T20 cricket, because that seems to at least provide, financial livelihood and succor to the players there. But apart from that, West Indies is struggling, and it was, not too long back, it was the best team in the world. We've seen that happening even in Pakistan. There's not, in terms of the financial resources, or New Zealand or South Africa.
Yeah.
So apart from England, India, and Australia, not necessarily in that order, I think India is at the top. But apart from these three countries, the others are actually all other countries all struggling to keep their ambitions or their aspirations of Test cricket afloat. We've seen recently in New Zealand a lot of the players actually refusing to sign the central contract because they don't want to be bound to playing Test cricket when they can make a decent or a better livelihood playing league cricket somewhere else. So
Yeah.
these are challenges that will have to be addressed, because at the end of the day, you can't have Test cricket only between 3 or 4 nations. That in itself will be it's staring us in the starkly in the face, or staring the ICC starkly in the face. So how do you expand the base of Test cricket playing nations is a challenge. Remember, Afghanistan played their first Test match in 2018 against India, but since then, how many matches have they played? Forget about Afghanistan. Even Bangladesh, made their international debut, so to speak, about 25 years ago, quarter of a century ago. When you look at their Test engagements, it's rather limited. It's limited actually to playing India, Sri Lanka. Just currently now they are playing in Pakistan. Not too many engagements with England, Australia, or New Zealand. Yes, there are, but they are sporadic rather than regular. So these are issues that need to be tackled head on, I think.
Yeah, and I was going to come to that. So, Test cricket always throws up these magical moments. Like with the West Indies team, you saw how Shamar Joseph on debut, like rattled the Australians, and they won that one Test match. They drew a Test series in Australia. It's huge. It was huge. And now then, Bangladesh have recently, few days ago, beaten Pakistan for the first time in Test matches. That too in Pakistan, and that too by 10 wickets. So, how do you explain this drop off in Pakistan cricket, and what did Bangladesh do right and do? As you already said, they deserve to play a lot more, right?
Yeah, I think Bangladesh, talking about Pakistan, it's very difficult to put a finger, because you never know what what will come up with Pakistan cricket next. But this, I think they've really hit the nadir, Anirudh, because this was a really shoddy performance, making 400, almost what, 450, 460 runs. It's one of those declarations which backfired. It backfired for Ben Stokes, if you remember, against Australia a year and a half back. Or when he declared in the first Test, and then they lost that match. But this was something, this was a higher score, and I just feel that there's a complete absence of focus and sense of purpose in Pakistan cricket. We've seen that happening over the last 2, 3 years. Remember, when England went there last, they beat Pakistan 3-0 in Pakistan. But losing to Bangladesh, which is not a very fancy team, they've had their own travails, own problems, they've had frequent changes in captaincy, etc. And they've come good. I think they held their nerve. That was the biggest thing, confronted with a fairly big, large score posted by Pakistan. They went and scored more than that. And then, Mushfiqur playing a superb knock. And then actually, with all the excuses that the Pakistani establishment tried to make about the pitch being this, or the players, the pitch is too flat. Then they said the pitch is being nasty and is taking too much turn, or it's giving too much help to the seamers. But hey, the same conditions applied even to Bangladesh, and they came out on top. So I think there's a lot of soul searching that Pakistan needs to be doing. They've got, their star players are just not delivering. We saw that in the T20 World Cup. We saw that in the ODI World Cup. Babar Azam, Shaheen Shah, Afridi. Apart from Mohammad Rizwan, I can't think of a single player, another player, who's been consistently delivering. So, well, that's all I can say. I think they really need to look within, because the answers won't come from outside.
Yeah. So, lastly, I know it's been a few days, but Shikhar Dhawan has announced his retirement from all formats. Now, he was a great force for India in the shorter formats, and really one of the batting mainstays of the IPL. I think he is the second highest scorer behind Kohli. But for me personally, what I remember about him is one of his graceful statements where he said that, yes, the youngsters do deserve my spot in the team because they're just playing better. So, what is your abiding memory of the Southpaw, Ayaz?
Actually, many, but foremost is his Test debut against Australia at Mohali. I think he made 187, didn't he, on debut?
Yes.
And that was a dazzling knock. It was a dazzling knock. And I remember I was doing commentary then for Star, and post that century, I met him on the ground. I was doing a little, quick interview with him, and I said, that was one hell of a knock. He says, I've been waiting to wear the whites and represent India. And now अब मुझे ये जगह मिल गई, मुझसे कोई नहीं लेगा. Means nobody can take this place for me.
Yeah.
So he played. I think he's had a rich career. More than what, 10 years? I think the one. So apart from the dazzling innings, debut Test century, what I remember also is that he was in absolutely brilliant form in the 2019 World Cup in the opening match that India played. He made a century, or at least made a century against Australia, and then it was discovered that he's got a fracture, so he couldn't take any further part in the tournament. And India really missed him in the semi-final against New Zealand. You know, a left-hand batsman against the swing bowlers that New Zealand possessed, and so India kind of lost out in the final. I think. I mean, you know, there are obviously ifs and buts, and one can't say exactly what might have happened. But if Shikhar had been there in the semi-final, who knows?
Yeah. So lastly, now moving forward, we have that second test between Pakistan and Bangladesh coming up, and we'll keep giving you the updates in case something major happens there again. So yeah, that's it for this episode of Sports Room. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Anirudh. Take care. Cheers.